talk about the long and at times frustrating and even humorous role of different therapies and growth along this journey, which until about a year ago didn't have a name. So there was the intense panic that I felt about not being understood and about being blamed and judged and labeled without having my day in court or being understood, that talk therapy helped with that part, because invariably, once I was done sharing my hours of stuff I didn't, felt like I would be typically judged for, I would get back from the therapist. That makes perfect sense to me. So, relief that what I am saying is understandable by someone. So that piece was helpful. In my teens, I listened to a lot of the Nightingale-Conant material. Success with a Positive Mental Attitude, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Effective Public Speaking, and these were amazing at bypassing and doing the kind of turn a lemon into lemonade process. So, for example, the underlying anxiety around settling down and being present with the emotions is so strong and chronic that I have a very active mind as my defense mechanism. And so, of course, I would run into Buddhists who say, just quiet down and empty your mind. And I'd say, this is a joke. What I want to do is focus my mind on accomplishment, goals, and success. I have an active mind. Why not use it to create success, which I did. I have an exceptional record on technical analysis and success when I'm not dealing with people, because there's no cultural overlay on technical issues. This type of soil behaves this way in this kind of weather, and equipment does this with these buttons, and houses get built like this when they're structured like this. And so I used that to systematically kind of batten down the hatches of survival and well-being. And since there was this chronic anxiety, and there was the cultural promise that you work hard, be successful, and then it'll all be all right. So I did work hard. I was successful, but it actually got worse. And what I mean by that is a little bit of the insanity piece that veterans experience when they get wired for war. They come back from active duty, and they find the very things that kept them alive and make them feel natural in a war zone now make them feel clumsy, humiliated, over the top, too irritable, blah, 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 blah. They can see they don't fit in, and who they have become is not welcome. It doesn't fit with this world, it fits with the war world. And I experienced a little bit around that with goals and success, because my mind was always thinking of all the things that could go wrong, and all the things that I needed to do urgently to fix it. And so climbing the ladder, so to speak, this anxiety was a focuser and an accelerator, because I am an amazing goal achiever. As soon as I get a goal, I can't wait to get it done. And there's two reasons for that. One, I'm highly motivated because I'm not being driven by the normal level of fear. That is, if this job isn't done on time, the client will probably, in this day and age, say, well, that's just typical contractor, because it is. But for me, that's not how it feels. It feels like, I'm not a good person, I didn't do what I said, maybe they'll be angry, blah, blah, blah. All these emotions that have nothing to do with the present are driving this. So there's a panic. So 80% of my jobs get done on time. And in that way, I'm an exceptional contractor. The focusing skills and the obsessive problem solving mean that I usually have 2 or 3 contingency plans for every unknown on the job. Clients see my track record of solving any number of wild cards that come up. And I get my relief at the end, like, I succeeded and held on, the world didn't fall apart, which is the feeling. I've gotten ahead. But after getting out of debt, after learning all the skills, after raising my income to, I have enough. It's enough. I can't really look at outer problems and say, I just need to do this one thing and then I'm going to be okay. I have to acknowledge with more and more clarity as each year goes on that the panic that I'm feeling is not sourced in the outer reality. There are any number of reasonable things, from earthquakes to blah, 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 that are there, but they're not making the typical person panic in this way. So it actually creates a split from reality in the same way that a veteran experiences coming back, that every little sound feels like a gunshot, every movement in the background means this, and every kid could be bringing in a bomb and all that, which was appropriate in Iraq because there was a statistical probability, but it's not appropriate here. And they can't change the feeling, and so many of them re-enlist. And so there's this actual split of sanity where having achieved the goals feels much worse because now the feelings have nothing to do with reality, which adds a new layer of what's wrong with me, that my anxiety is up as I have a safer reality than anyone that I know. It also creates hopelessness because, when you're 20, you've got lots of skills to learn and a truck to buy and this and that and the other. There's the hope that I do all this, all the things I'm supposed to do as a citizen, and then I will be okay, I will feel safe. But when you do them all and you feel worse, you can't believe that particular mythology anymore. And the question is, oh my God, am I just going to be stuck here with this feeling for no apparent reason that nobody wants to talk about and no one is giving me any framework to understand other than that I'm weird for the rest of my life? It's very, very unsettling. Diet, various things have their purpose and probably helped, but of course don't get to the core issue, which is not dietary. Energy work, just being still and silent and letting love and healing come in through the hands of a sensitive who's able to bring that energy in helps. But it is temporary. What I mean is, if I have a good rapport with an energy healer, it feels great, to be around a sensitive, attuned, caring person that's dedicating themselves to healing. That's the kind of world that feels nice to someone who's traumatized as a child. So it's like there's a lot of psychological stuff around that story that's good. When they're a nice person, and they're attuned, and they're not lecturing and, jostling and doing all the stuff that's part of normal modern life. Very settling. I actually can feel physical sensations, even with my eyes closed, with some energy healers, and they're peaceful. And it's reassuring to know that somebody knows something of what they're doing that has some benefit, because it gives hope. The most deadly part of this whole thing is this free-floating terror, hopelessness, dread, panic, with the sense that nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. As evidenced by the fact of their blank stares, their passion not to listen, their ineffective suggestions. I've tried hundreds of them. And or they're just blank, I don't know. So finding someone that can do something that's great is wonderful. And I'd have to say that a lot of my strategies along the way have given little bumps along the way, like, something felt better. Like when I did yoga for a number of years, it would help me enter my body and, and breathe more deeply. When I did healing inner child meditation in my teens, I think it really helped. I felt like I could feel that things were getting about 30% better. And I actually think that, as terrifying and painful as things feel at times, that the reality I'm living in is 30% better as a result of that regress and love the inner child that, was so traumatized. That works. So, so there was a wave of that. I did a whole wave of channeling work with Seth, with mostly with Lazarus, a little bit Ramtha, and that was exciting. A new frontier. And as with anything, just look at it objectively and look at, are the benefits for the amount of hours and dollars spent better than all the alternatives. And I could certainly say for a number of years and in a number of situations, that was great, meaning I had healing moments, I had blissful moments, I had moments of growth and insight. I developed different paradigms of thinking. A new perspective always adds depth perception. And so you can now compare. And I still will use thought patterns from that time where I'll say, well, looking at it from the channel perspective, it would look like this, and from Seth's perspective like that, and from my old therapist would probably say this, and in looking at all those perspectives, is there something in there that's really a great insight that I can use right now? So all of this helped, and yet it brought me to this point of 80% of my energy is gone because of this constant anxiety of chronic fatigue. None of the channeling, none of the 600 books, none of the therapies, none of the diet, none of the creating this heaven on earth reality where I got a whole house to myself filled with crystals and plants and no one bothering me and control of the environment and the sound and nothing's triggering that. That's all there. And yet it's all there bringing my attention to this huge void with no distractions, i.e., that there's all this pain, there's all this terror, there's all this loneliness, and clearly none of this has helped, meaning the net result of all this work and all this success is to leave me with no distractions in this place. And so that precipitated a big crisis, and I'll talk about that on the next video. So in the last video, I culminated by saying that kind of what success ended up looking at was arriving at a big problem I still didn't know how to solve, that wasn't being helped with no distractions. And so, back came suicide as an ally to bring back a sense of control. Now, I mentioned suicide in a couple of videos before, and it's shown up when I feel overwhelmed, out of control, and in a lot more pain and misery than joy and well-being. And as such, it's not a problem, it's a solution for something that I don't know how to deal with. So suicide presented itself, and in each of the successive prior waves, there have been about 4 times in my life that I felt suicidal. I had a conversation, and it goes like this. So, hello in there, you want to die? Yes, I want to die. Why do you want to die? Well, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this. And the bottom line is it's more painful to be alive than to die. Whether I turn into ash and just, disappear, or whether I go into an afterlife, which has got to be better than this, it's more painful. So, okay, I accept that. Anyone in there want to live? Well, when you really seriously consider dying, or at least when I do, there's always another voice. No, don't kill us. Let's, surely there's something we can do. And I say, okay, what do you want to do? I kind of play referee between these two inner voices because they both make sense. But I feel like the part that wants to die has a point. Why should he continue living when it's more miserable than dying? I mean, that's pretty miserable. And if he doesn't know what to do to fix it, and no one else around me does, and even wants to listen to the issue, well, that's, it's hard to say, oh, well, it's going to get better next year. Why? It didn't get better last year. So what's the logic for that? And so the part that wants to live, of course, there's always been that part. And it's like, why do you want to live? What's so exciting about this painful life? Why do you want to live? And a dialogue starts up. And I think this is a really healthy dialogue because, this part says, I am no longer going to go through all this pain just to fit into other people's expectations and stuff. It's pointless. I don't believe in it, blah, blah, blah. And this part will say, okay, I agree. We don't need to conform like that. We're going to do things differently. How about that? What if, and the part that wants to live will ask, I'll ask, what would make life worth living? And there have been some interesting answers that have helped for a time. So one time, the answer was start 2 groups, one on healthy relationships, one on fun, spontaneous moments. These were a response to the fact that part of the reason I wanted to die is like, it's so boring in this culture. What is acceptable and what is traditional? I mean, like, going out for coffee is so boring. Why would you put up with all this pain, etc., just for that? 2 weeks in advance plans, making a point of being there, going through traffic, noisy place, a bitter drink, 20 minutes of blah, 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 and you separate. I mean, it's like, is that really worth living for? And this part certainly didn't feel that way. I'd say, got a point, so, and, what would be worth living for? So this is actually a pretty exciting dialogue. And the way I look at it objectively is I kind of watch this whole process and what I'm doing with it is, the suicide is providing control, asserting a boundary, communicating a message. Something has to be done. And it's got my attention, of course. I'm gonna listen if I'm starting to consider dying, because it's a pretty big decision. You've grown up, all this, done all this preparatory work for life. You get here and it's shitty, and then, but it's still a lot of preparation work to just throw away. And so what could make it really exciting? And so I've had deals with myself around this where the part that says it's shitty, and I say, yeah, I agree. And the part that says, surely we can do something, and I say, well, what? Let's hear it. And the conversation. And, I'm illustrating it in 2 different hands and stuff. But, we all have these 2 voices in any choice. And I think it's healthy and intelligent to have a real analytical assessment of why we're thinking and feeling what we're doing. And the net result has been big boosts that have given me the impetus and the enjoyment of staying alive a couple more years. Until they fizzle out, until it's been kind of a process of new ideas that give some hope that this underlying chronic pain, anxiety, horror, grief, and shame is going to feel better sometime, somehow. And of course, there's distractions, which has been a big part of it. In my last big round with this, I did everything on my bucket list. And this was not entirely a suicide-driven thing. I was becoming bitter. It's like I feel exhausted, cynical, bitter. Cynicism is very natural when you've had a couple hundred people all promise some kind of relief, take your money, and then not show up when it's not forthcoming. You get cynical, particularly when people leave you in hell, and aren't willing to live up to their side of the bargain. So I understand that, but I'm not willing to just grow old and become a bitter and cynical man. My father had PTSD. I've now learned he did become incredibly bitter and continued hurting and torturing people until his recent death. And I didn't want to become that way. I also felt like, that it's better to die than become that person. And he was pretty smart and successful, and so and obviously hadn't come across resources in the culture that helped him heal that disease. And so on what basis would I say that I could, become that. But I did everything on my bucket list, and that gave me 2 years of incredible hedonistic distraction and distraction, from all that pain. Felt pretty great until the hedonic adaptation level, the hedonic adaptation principle is such that the more you increase the drug of pleasure, whether it's cocaine or sex or race cars, whatever, the higher you go, it's just a matter of time before your brain catches up and you go back to your set point, which when that's horror, trauma, and misery is miserable. So, jumping out of planes, hang gliding, paragliding, diving through tropical waterfalls, learning to kite surf, jet skiing, traveling, exotic lovers, wonderful hotels, writing the books that I hadn't written, filling the house with flowers. All of these things gave me a year of hedonism and then a year of coasting on the adrenaline, the whole thrill that, yes, things had changed. And then with that intensity, like, going to Vegas and seeing all the Cirque du Soleil shows and, just intensity. It was just a very conscious, let's outwit the brain that's constantly numbing all this stuff out and do everything new as intensely and quickly and spontaneously as possible. It's kind of my last big thrust to kind of feel some sense of control and protection from, this underlying emptiness and pain. And so that, that was my last big push. And then, of course, the bucket list is done. It's like, was it really that fun jumping out of the plane? Not really. Diving through the tropical water feature, repeated that or the tropical waterfalls and river swimming, repeating some of that. But whatever you do on a physical level, when there's an underlying PTSD, and then there's exhaustion as well, so it can't be quite as constant as it is because every day I have to watch my chronic fatigue, which is, increased from, in my early 20s before I got a massive chemical exposure to diesel fumes and was just out for a couple of months in a high stress environment. Then I just my energy went way down, it went up a bit, and then it's slowly gone down. So I have about a third of the energy I had before, and I'm only 41. So I have to watch that, and my muscles have started aching with the continual anxiety that they hold and no real relief. And the fact that my brain turns every little thing into a life and death type of anxiety. So am I going to get to the bus station on time? Life and death. Am I going to be on time for this client appointment or 3 minutes late? Life and death. Am I going to, have I communicated clearly enough so this client won't feel ripped off? Life and death. It's this constant, everything is big. And it doesn't matter if my mind knows that it isn't. My body and my emotions know that it's life and death. And it's very frustrating. I watch my body just getting exhausted by it. And I have these nice therapists that just sit there and say, that sounds difficult. You fucking bastards, do something about it. Tell me what the fuck's going on. Because until I stumbled into a cafe, and it's one of the reasons I'm making these videos, is there's a bunch of poor sods out there like me that haven't a clue what's going on. Nobody's telling them. And I'm learning this in a cafe. So this young man in a cafe, when I'm going through one of the bigger crises and meltdowns, talks to me about trauma. And of course, I think that doesn't apply to me. I'm not a veteran. I haven't experienced any heinous abuse or anything. What's the deal? But he talks a little bit about it, and it's like, I have tried everything. I am at my wit's end. I bought the book in 5 minutes, listened to it the next 3 days. Aha! Something useful. Started working with it. And so in this way, it's a little bit of a joke, but $250,000 of experts did less for me in some ways than this stranger in a cafe who mentioned trauma and PTSD in a way that gave me a clue. And so that's why YouTube is, are we entering an age where we learn more from one another, peer-to-peer, than we do from overpaid experts that really don't have enough comprehensive knowledge to know, what's going on. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about some of my symptoms that kind of told me something's going on, and then the frustration of not knowing what it is. It's a kind of a mystery, like what will thread all these things together. All right, so in this video, I want to talk about kind of the breadcrumbs that I followed in my journey of kind of putting words to all this, because it's a very unfriendly environment in our modern world for deep, unknown, vague patterns and conversations, particularly not positive ones, where you don't have a name for something and it doesn't sound very fun. So this, it's very unpopular basically, and so it's frustrating. But here's some of the symptoms that kind of I sorted out. So I knew that because there was a time from age 5 to age 10 that I enjoyed torturing my younger siblings, basically making them feel helpless. I knew that, and the way that stopped was I separated from the family. So the first thing I would say that I knew is that environment was key. That I knew that there wasn't really that much difference between me as a great, accomplished contractor and goal achiever and personal growth pursuer and all that, and me as someone who enjoyed making young children feel helpless. What was different was how healthy the environment was. So when I couldn't stop that, even though I felt some disgust around that from age 5 to 10, I started consciously partitioning myself from my family to a point where I was completely isolated by around 13, 14. Some of that was boarding school, some of that when I was living with them was just refusing to have any contact. And I found that I could become the person I wanted to be if I was not barraged by the stimulation of pain, insanity, triggers, and all that brought on by my parents. So that was kind of first clue. 2, I had a very, very deep dissociative depression when I was about 13. And I learned that I needed structure to help with that. And I designed my own homeschooling program, and bingo, it lifted. I had an episode when I was 21 in which the environment, again, was not healthy. I was around a very unhealthy woman who was a client of mine, and I started eating, binge eating sweets compulsively, and I'd never felt anything like that. It was it was the one and only compulsive substance of my life. And I had this strange experience that meditation and poetry made it worse. So I completely kind of barricaded myself from emotion and stuff for a bit, recovered my normal eating style, and went back to work and kind of focused on being a hard-nosed contractor and just working hard and becoming a bit compulsive because I didn't know how to deal with that. And then the next thing that I experienced in some of my early therapy was I had a certain compulsiveness that I needed to share everything or nothing. And it was really upsetting to kind of get started talking about that and then be interrupted and told, you're done. And so I hired one woman to just talk with me until I was done for like 3 hours. Which was really expensive. I had very little money at the time. I ended up paying like $600. And I had this thing, I've got to get this message across. I've got to get you to see something in all this talking, and I need you to see it. And she didn't. She just took my money and left, and that was that. And it's like, well, that's really expensive, and I felt anxious the whole time. And so it's like, well, that was worse. Meaning I could have spent $600 on massages and stuff like that and felt better. And so there was already this kind of analysis of return on investment and stuff like that. And so I tried various things, and occasionally massage would be good if it was a really sensitive masseuse. I did acupuncture, which made things worse, but what was it called? Qigong. She would do a little Qigong at the end of the acupuncture that felt amazing. So I said, cut it out. Stop the acupuncture. I feel terrible. I feel, dazed and dissociated for a few days afterwards. I don't want to pay for that. Give me some Qigong. And she kind of fought me a little bit around that. I'm an acupuncturist. I just do that at the end. It's like, well, do what you do at the end and the whole time, and let me pay for some of that. And I think we did some of that, but she was the same woman that charged me $600 to listen and couldn't hear anything in what I was saying to help me understand or get it or respond. And I felt a little, bitter around that. And about it being so financial, meaning, it's like I'm desperately trying to get, to the root of some of the issues around sanity and release of this fear, and you're just sitting there with no empathy for what this is like or wanting to help me do something about it, or the fact that, as a 20-year-old new landscaper, I can't afford hundreds of dollars per conversation, So there's really, I felt a divide and some hurt and separate from the culture. Like, I don't have a nurturing man or woman available to me that really actually cares about me. It's all about money, and there's some bitterness around that. And this is the kind of bitterness I also think that can putrefy into hate, because when you really need help and you're desperate and you're asking for it, and people are responding with this penny pinching mentality of this is my fee and this is my session and all of that, particularly when they're useless. So it's this there's this real sense of being used, being a bit of a guinea pig, feeling like an idiot, feeling humiliated, and there's hurt and there's smallness around that. And no one's responding, no one's hearing, no one's understanding, no one's saying, yeah, this is fucked up. You shouldn't have had this stuff done to you. You shouldn't be in a culture where they don't even study emotions enough to educate you in school about the most basic stuff. Your, quote, professionals aren't terribly effective, but they're happy to take your money, and then if you run out, you're just screwed. It's a kind of bitter, cold feeling. Doesn't leave a warm, fuzzy, loyal kind of sense of, I'm being cared for. And so there's definitely that wave of bitterness, and with that a certain wariness, because when you're exhausted, when you can feel worse for days after talking about some of this stuff, when it's expensive, when you don't have the money, and then you need to work hard when you're exhausted and don't feel good to make the money to pay for it, nobody gives a damn. It's a pretty miserable existence. And then the Lazarus create your own reality and stuff had some wonderful parts of it, and very playful and imaginative parts, but also some shaming parts. You create your own reality, i.e. all this is my fault. And I didn't like the lies that were in the community around that, and just the silence around what was going on. So for those of you that do or don't know some of the create your own reality circles, when it gets really dogmatic, you get people showing off what they created because it's all them, and they'll even rent fancy sport cars they don't survive to go to the seminars on. They can't afford to go to the seminars and create your own reality, and then feel like a panic because how they're going to pay the bill, but they don't want to admit to anyone that they're not improving their life or whatever. They're just spending lots of money on seminars on creating your own reality, and then when you see the aging seminars, like longevity and immortality and all that, and then you watch the people get old and get sick after 10 years, and then all the abundance things, but you're just spending a lot of money on the seminars. You could be investing in stocks or bonds or whatever, and so there's a certain amount of an obvious hypocrisy. And just, to me, trying to make sense of it all, there's a lot of good stuff, there's a lot of fun stuff, there's value, like there is in everything, and yet nobody's willing to talk about all the crap. And that felt just like home. Nobody at all, in the family or outside the family, wanted to talk about the crap. Everyone wanted to talk about how lucky I was to go to private school. Everyone wanted to talk about how I was in the luckiest 2%. And in terms of external success and all that, I definitely am. I'm so lucky to be a white American man at a time in history where this crazy planet has decided that white American men get the power, get the money, disproportionate to everyone else. It's not fair, healthy. It's not community building. It's not good for anyone, including the white men who are separated or taught to behave separatingly and all that. So it's not good. But there's definite perks around that, which, for better and worse, I am very lucky to receive. And it doesn't change feeling like shit at all. Although I wonder, I don't know if I can only imagine, adding to the PTSD being part of certain discriminated and shamed minorities. It's just mind-boggling. But anyway, I found I could not address the craziness that was going on without being punished within the community. So I felt like an outsider again, like the full story is not welcome anywhere. It's not welcome in the community. It's not welcome in the school. It's not welcome. Friends don't welcome it. It takes too much time, whatever. And I felt very, very, very alone in all this. And every time I spoke up, which I did a lot of, because feeling insane is worse, I feel this kind of life and death anxiety. So this is, and trying around different. I have a strict vitamin regimen of vitamin D, vitamin multivitamin, vitamin B, vitamin B12, vitamin E, lots of vitamin C. Sometimes supplemented by other things. There's different stuff that I've tried that sometimes helps a little bit. Learning that I had gluten allergies, learning that I had dairy allergies, getting rid of my hay fever, all of that helped. But because alleviating noise and crisis out there leaves me alone with the noise and crisis in here that is not in the present, it actually feels worse to succeed, which brought me to my most recent crisis. And just a few of the little hints along the way that things weren't right. I would go to, it just happened one year that I would go to work. And when I was working alone, for the first time, I worked alone a lot. But for the first time when I was working alone, I had this sense of dread and numbness, and I didn't want to move my body. What the fuck, I've got to work. Why am I having this feeling? Why is it only showing up at work? What is going on here? Talk to my therapist. Clueless. Talk to a few friends. Clueless. It's like, I'm clueless. No one taught me this was on the road or what to do with it. What to do. So I solved that one just by not being alone on the job site. I had the money to buy a few assistants that I didn't need just to eliminate that particular symptom of an amorphous dread and numbness. And I'm angry at this point. It's like nobody has a clue about this. And of course it doesn't show up in the therapy sessions. Because it's apparently triggered in part by being alone. And nobody wants to be there with me. I don't have any friends that say, wow, that's painful. Let me just come and be with you at work. We're a kind of driven, busy culture, and so there's no one that wants to be with us. So fitting into the economy mentality of the U.S. culture, of course, you buy people to company and supposedly do something, but often, just often get in the way to help. Not with work, with being able to get stuff done, because if I'm around two or more people, this particular symptom does not show up. It never showed up for the first 10 years of work. Showed up one day, became enough of a consistent pattern that I was procrastinating going to work in order to avoid running into this. I'm realizing the procrastinated work is costing me more than hiring a couple of assistants, so do it. And yet, is this 1% of the population, 2%, 5%? How much percent of the population has been having these types of experiences over a lifetime, and how much is it costing the economy to pretend that nothing is happening and not do the research on the brain, not do the research and education on emotions that could prevent this. Because, and then what's happening with the people who can't afford to hire 2 assistants because that's the magic number? It's 2 or more, basically. And what happens is I switch roles. When there are 2 or more assistants, I'm kind of running around keeping them busy in a supervisory role as to being totally, fully present in my body. So there's something about being totally, fully present in my body with the amount of intimacy needed to do detailed mechanical work that brings me in touch with a certain emotion that surfaced at a certain point and has kind of remained available to get triggered. And I'm stepping aside it by changing roles to a management position where I'm not in my body, I'm much more in my head. And bingo, the problem is solved, or i.e. the symptom is bypassed. The pain, the dread, whatever is going on inside that brought up that symptom is still there. This is a very rudimentary level of diagnosis, of intelligence, and it's not at all clear to me. I keep an eye on the latest brain scanners and stuff, that even if, let's say they do a scan and I've got, the sign of Ptsd, that, okay, but big deal, like, what are you going to do about it? Do you have a laser thing or something, or a pill that really is going to stop that dread? So this is kind of the frustrating level that I think we're at a culture where it's very hit or miss, but it's very satisfying to have all that laid out in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is actually available on YouTube unabridged and on Audible for a fee. So it's well worth the read. So studies have shown there's a strong correlation to pain, trauma, and addiction, and particularly trauma, because one of the main things an addict is seeking is control. If you're experiencing a timeless ache, an endless depression, a boundaryless terror that's not defined, and you can, for example, cut yourself. I've talked with and understood the psychology of mostly women. Women tend to hurt themselves, men tend to hurt other people, who cut themselves. What they're looking for is to distract the mind from a pain and a sensation they have no control over, and pull the mind to a pain they have complete control over, and in doing so create the illusion of control. It's very intelligent. Rather than being frozen in a timeless dread and horror and have no sense of anything around, it's like, oh, I can just cut myself. Now I did that. That I felt something, I did something, my brain is now on this, I have power. It's a little bit like the suicide trick. And so I have known, and one of my symptoms of pain and trauma, etc., is that I'm 20% compulsive. What I mean by that is in any given day, if I add up the amount of minutes in the year, I have to process pain and anxiety by being hyperfixated on something about 20% of the time. Now, knowing that, accepting it, knowing it's a strategy, because there's 2 parts of the brain. There's the broad spectrum part of the brain, which is the part that takes in a wide amount of thing. And that's the part of the brain that is really vulnerable to trauma, because everything feels overwhelming. It's all flooding in. There's nothing safe in the environment. And it's like it's overwhelming and all-consuming. So it's that part of the brain that feels kind of peripheral in focus. Now, we have another part of our brain that's hyper tunnel vision, which is just one thing at a time, full attention until complete 100% focus. And this part of the brain offers a beautiful escape from boundless terror, because when, like, I'm in that part of the brain making this video, it's one of the attractions of doing these videos, and it's actually part of the protection and the compulsive element that I'm making all of these videos in one day. They're part of my focus, and if I can focus on this one thing and get it done, I have protection for that period of time from the vulnerability of wondering if and when and how much I'm going to be hit with dread, with terror, with shame. That's actually been coming up in waves in the past few days. So as those uncontrollable waves, in this case of shame, which, why? No idea. Like, I have no idea. There's nothing I can point to that I'm doing or not doing that is shameful. And yet, I've got this massive waves of just feeling, terror of being found out. I'm a horrible person. I'm all alone. Very shameful. Nobody likes you. They're all going to see what a villain you are, etc. So I've kind of learned that this is the way the part of me that was torturing my siblings felt from age 5 to age 10. It was a part of me that woke up doing that, i.e. repeating what had been done to me by my parents, up until, it didn't stop then, but, throughout the whole, age 2 to age 10 or whatever. Me deciding I was this horrible person and God was going to punish me and that there was no hope. And all this fear, all the fear of being abused and all this fear of being found out that I was the abuser. So this is, I'm imagining, where this feeling is stored in those memories, but it's kind of a free-floating feeling in terms of how and when it emerges in the present. So I'm hit with this huge wave of stuff. And it's intolerable. It's a miserable wave. And I go into a panic. Like, what is my survival response? My mind is going 90 miles an hour. This is not okay. This is not healthy. This is a really dangerous place for my health, because I can just feel the way it moves the whole way my body physiology feels changes and becomes, the best way I can say is ugly. It's sensations in the body that feel sickly, the muscles that feel sore and painful, images flood my brain of painful images. The emotion is terrifying and painful. And my mind is saying, okay, another irrational, drag through the ringers of hell for who knows what reason today, and who knows how long this is going to go on. I've got to respond. And so there's a kind of a partnering that goes on, a negotiation, like, well, could I talk to my girlfriend about it and just spell it all out in detail? I do that sometimes, and it helps. Because now I'm not completely alone in this delusion. I say delusion just because it overshadows the present moment in its intensity, but it has nothing to do with the present moment, but it's real in its reality, in the chemistry of the brain and in the memories of the body. And it's real in its cry out for, someone in this culture, someone in this world, do something about this. Do some more research. We as a body are getting exhausted by the constant adrenaline addiction and rush of all this anxiety. It's brought up by all these memories that are frozen in place. Somebody do something. And so in that way, it's healthy. It's a reminder. Yeah. Culture still hasn't figured it out. I haven't figured it out. None of my therapists have figured it out. Do something. And what to do? Well, making these videos is one reasonably healthy thing, partly because if I'm feeling alone in all of this, there's going to be other people. You may be feeling alone either at times or in this moment, and this video is telling you you're not alone. You're not crazy. There's, at least some reasonable paradigms for understanding some of it, and the fact that there aren't more is not really a symptom of something wrong with you as a human being. It's something wrong with the culture. It's certainly not a healthy culture when parents torture their children and the entire surrounding adult population colludes to avoid seeing the symptoms, block communication, deny and punish the child for talking about it. I mean, that's a pretty sick culture. And just as bad, the sickness and the terror that gets started in the child and in the chemistry of the body and all that, we are not that great as a culture of healing that disease. Instead, it tends to be generational. And so I've chosen not to have children because in the same way that I avoided torturing my siblings by stepping out of the environment in which I was constantly being terrified myself, I'm concerned that while I might do a better job than my parents, I've learned a little bit about my grandparents, and my impression is they were worse on my parents than my parents were on me. In other words, that we start off with, big national and various traumas that hit certain populations and with terror and pain and stuff. They take it out on their children a lot. Those take it out somewhat on their children, and it seems to improve about a third with each generation. But that's not good enough. I'm not going to inflict a third of this pain onto a helpless child because even as an adult, the full amount of it is close to killing me at times, and it's miserable. I don't want to give the child that. And I greatly resent my parents having 5 children and inflicting this on all of them. Each one of my siblings is dealing with this in different ways and is in an extraordinary amount of pain. We're all quite successful in various ways as well, which in some ways suggests that probably there's a good percentage of the population getting it a lot worse. And it's not okay. It's not okay to just let this be ignored. I've kept my company small because stress is one of the few variables in all this that I can control. So if I'm low stress, I'm less likely to take out my stress on my employees. So I haven't had kids and thus have not been abusive to my children, but I am well aware that as normal as it is for contractors, which is, again, telling me how sick we are as a culture, the way that I talk with my crew when they trigger me, don't do what I'm saying, argue with me, don't respect time-sensitive issues or money that's at stake, just do the normal things that crews do. When that all comes up and I'm under stress, I can just feel the hostility that I have. Shut the fuck up. I do not want to hear another argument why you're not doing this, etc. Just go and do exactly what I asked, or that's the end of it. And it's not nice. It's not fun. I can feel the fear, the terror, the rage, and I don't like myself. And that's the best I can do after $250K in therapy, after 600 books, after reducing all kinds of stress in my life. And it's painful. It's painful to be that way and to see my father in me. That the terror was put into my body and my brain and in the memories in a way that goes on and on and on, in a way that I'm not outgrowing that parts of it are getting worse. It's miserably painful. And the inability to respond to it, I haven't begun to tell you all the different therapies and monies and books and stuff that I've spent and done to try and respond to this. And to feel like it's not working. Where's that urge coming from still after, X forgiveness meditations, X writings, da-da-da-da-da. And it comes finally back to shame. There's something wrong with me that I'm feeling this way. But of course, we know you cannot force feelings. Feelings are a natural byproduct of a condition. Rage is a natural byproduct of helplessness, terror, shame, loneliness, frustration, repetitively going on. And I feel all of that when I've done all this stuff, prepared everything and given the crew, detailed instructions consistent with what I promised the client, and they have a better idea. I feel rage. And the only question is, based on how much stress I'm going on at the time, is the level of hostility that I express at that time. I don't shout. I'm not physically violent. But words are enough. One can feel a lot of the wounds my father did to me were making me feel so stupid. As a 5-year-old, he'd have these endless intellectual debates with me ever since I could barely talk, lead me into corners in the debate, and then humiliate me. Would you do this or would you do that? I don't know, Dad. Well, this. Oh, you're an idiot for doing that because of the listen to another. That was the only way to connect with anyone in their complete dissociative emotional existence. This was my life. And it's really easy to make someone feel like an idiot because I got good at debating. It's also really easy to want to punish the crew when I've done everything I possibly can to line up work for them and blah, 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 and it seems they're intent on sabotaging it by ignoring what's going to help us maintain the trust of the client, doing what I said I would do when I said I would do it in the way I said I would do it, which is, what I'm asking. And so I don't actually feel like I've succeeded because even though my crew are headstrong and stubborn, I watch them crumple before that kind of barrage of disgust and impatience that I feel. We're very sensitive human beings. And I don't know what's going on with them and their, history and stuff that's, led them to behave this way. But this is taking a huge toll on morale, on growth of businesses, on medical expenses, treating this kind of stuff, and it's not treated very well in a hospital. The only time I've been hospitalized in my life for kidney treatment, I felt incredibly violated and outraged, and was, quite inappropriate as a guest in the hospital, as I was poked and irritated with loud noises and woken up and just treated like an object. I was furious. So it doesn't help to be in hospitals, as far as I can tell, for this kind of thing. It's just a deep wound of dignity, of safety, of love, of respect. And I'm feeling like the best, we need data. We need data on this kind of stuff. And I'm really encouraged by the wave of TED Talks and videos and things on PTSD, and I'm thrilled to be, reading it on the book. But I also know that because I have this dual story, that 90% of the way that I'm seen is as a success. And I know that because people talk to me about that. You're so lucky to be on vacation. You're so lucky to have your own business. You're so smart to make all this money. You're so competent. Your work is so beautiful. You're this and that. And yet, none of that means anything when you're in a timeless zone, when you're no longer in the present, and when a deep wave of dread and shame just starts washing through the body, and it's kind of like, I don't know how to respond. I feel completely helpless. It's like a wave of invading troops just washing over my country. And I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I just try fiddling around, becoming obsessive, in a hopefully constructive way. See if that works. Is there a goal I can throw myself into? Becoming compulsive around something that seems moderately useful. Like I became a compulsive therapy user because I figured it's better than becoming a compulsive eater. And I can choose how to funnel my compulsiveness so I can, manically get a job done early. Great, I make lots of money, the client's happy, etc. This is what I've learned in my explorations of PTSD.